My dad had always been a proud man, at least in public. But the truth about his pride was very selective. He loved boasting about my brother's college achievements, my sister's singing trophies, and even his own career back in the 80s. But when it came to me, his youngest, the one who chose a different path, he never quite knew what to say, or perhaps never wanted to. I didn't take the traditional route. I didn't go to college straight out of high school. Instead, I took odd jobs, worked security gigs at nightclubs, stadiums, and concerts. I did what I had to do to survive, but I never stopped dreaming. I didn't brag about my plans. I didn't talk much about my ambitions because I knew no one in my family would understand, especially not my father, the man who always valued titles, suits, and socially impressive professions. To him, I was always just something, just a kid, just a burden, just a security guard. And nothing reminded me of this more than the day of my cousin's wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony, really, held at a grand venue just outside the city. Everyone was dressed to the nines, the decorations sparkled, and the air was thick with the scent of roses and fine perfume. I wasn't even planning to attend, to be honest, but my mother convinced me, said it would mean a lot to the family. So I went, dressed in a simple black suit, nothing too flashy. I didn't want attention, I never did. But somehow, I still became the center of it all, just not in the way I'd expected. As I stood by the entrance to greet a few relatives I hadn't seen in years, I overheard my father speaking to a group of guests who were asking what I did for a living. "Oh, him," he chuckled. "He's just a security guard." That phrase, "just a security guard," it hit me harder than I thought it would, especially because it wasn't just an explanation. It was laced with embarrassment, with dismissal, with shame. I stood there, pretending I hadn't heard it, pretending I didn't feel that old familiar sting in my chest. My father's voice didn't waver when he said it. In fact, he said it so casually, as if it were some offhand comment about the weather or the food. But to me, it felt like a punch in the gut. I wanted to turn around, to confront him. But what would I even say? I'd heard this tone before, seen this look before, one that dismissed every bit of my effort as insignificant. So I stayed quiet. I smiled at the other guests, nodded politely, and kept the pain tucked away behind my teeth. My mother noticed, of course. She always did. She walked up to me, gave my arm a gentle squeeze, and asked if I was okay. I lied, and said I was. The reception went on. Speeches were made, champagne was poured, and laughter echoed through the hall. But all I could hear was that one sentence repeating in my head. Just a security guard. I went home that night, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling. But I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I felt fire. I felt determination. Because what my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while I worked those late-night shifts guarding doors and backstages, I was also working on something bigger. I had been building an idea, a media project, a digital investigative channel. I had been documenting, interviewing, filming, and editing behind the scenes for over a year. I had contacts in journalism, some who believed in me more than my family ever had. And 1 week before that wedding, I had signed a contract with a major streaming platform to host a docuseries I created, a series that exposed corruption in private security companies, something I had witnessed firsthand. The pilot episode was scheduled to air that very weekend, but I didn't tell anyone, not yet, not even my mother, because I wanted them to see it, to see me, not the version my father reduced me to, the real me. I knew the moment would come when everything they thought they knew about me would change. All the nights I worked in silence, all the moments I kept to myself, were about to become visible to the world. The trailer dropped first, just a 60-second preview of the documentary series I had produced, directed, and narrated. In it were clips of interviews, raw footage from high-risk situations, and a glimpse of the stories no one dared to tell. It went viral within hours, with people sharing it across social media, praising its bravery and emotional depth. But my full name appeared at the end in bold white letters over a black screen, not as a security guard, but as the creator, the storyteller, the whistleblower. I knew the moment would come when everything they thought they knew about me would change. All the nights I worked in silence, all the moments I kept to myself, were about to become visible to the world. The trailer dropped first, just a preview of the documentary series I had produced, directed, and narrated. I knew the moment would come when everything they thought they knew about me would change. All the nights I worked in silence, all the moments I kept to myself, were about to become visible to the world. The trailer dropped first, just a preview of the documentary series I had produced, directed, and narrated. In it were clips of interviews, raw footage from high-risk situations, and a glimpse of the stories no one dared to tell. It went viral within hours, with people sharing it across social media, praising its bravery and emotional depth. But my full name appeared at the end in bold white letters over a black screen, not as a security guard, but as the creator, the storyteller, the whistleblower. I knew the moment would come when everything they thought they knew about me would change. All the nights I worked in silence, all the moments I kept to myself, were about to become visible to the world. The trailer dropped first, just a 60-second preview of the documentary series I had produced, directed, and narrated. In it were clips of interviews, raw footage from high-risk situations, and a glimpse of the stories no one dared to tell. I didn't check my phone for hours after the trailer dropped. I didn't want to see the numbers, the likes, the comments. I wasn't doing it for viral fame. I was doing it to speak the truth I had seen, lived, and guarded night after night while people passed me by as if I were invisible. But then, that evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, sipping coffee and thinking about how much had changed in just a few hours, my phone buzzed, again and again. Dozens of messages, missed calls, mentions, but one message stood out. It was from my sister. Just 3 words. Dad saw it. My breath caught. For a moment, I froze, unsure of what he might say or do. Would he call? Would he finally acknowledge it? Or would he pretend it never happened? I waited. I watched the screen. Nothing. But then, an hour later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was one of the wedding guests, a distant uncle, someone who had barely acknowledged me at the event. His voice was excited, almost reverent. "I just watched your show," he said. "You've done something huge, son. Don't let anyone downplay it." And just like that, everything began to shift. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Apologies, congratulations, invitations, and still, nothing from Dad. Not a word, not a single reaction. But I knew he had seen it. I could imagine him sitting in his favorite chair, phone in hand, jaw clenched, watching the screen as his just a security guard son told the world a story no one else had the courage to tell. The next morning, I woke up to my name trending on local news sites. They had picked up the trailer, calling it an expose years in the making and a must-watch debut by an unexpected filmmaker. I didn't feel famous. I didn't feel different. I just felt seen. For the first time, my work wasn't being ignored, buried behind the noise of family expectations or drowned out by my father's constant need to minimize everything I ever did. And then came the moment that changed everything. Around noon, I got a message from one of the producers at the streaming platform. "You might want to turn on Channel 6, it said. Curious and a little anxious, I turned on the television, and there it was, a news segment titled, "From Security Guard to Truth Teller," the story behind the viral documentaries. My face on the screen, my voice narrating the segment, B-roll footage of me at protests, in corporate boardrooms, and even sitting quietly at my editing desk, piecing together the truth. My phone lit up again, not with texts this time, but with screenshots from the TV, friends, colleagues, strangers, and then, one caught my eye, a photo sent from the wedding venue's group chat, a wide shot of the reception hall from a few days ago, and in the corner, my father, watching the TV from the bar area, his eyes locked on the screen. Someone had written underneath it, "Isn't that his son?" Suddenly, the silence from him meant something else, not denial, not dismissal, but stunned realization. He hadn't seen this coming. None of them had. And for once, I didn't need to say a word. The world was saying it for me. That evening, for the first time in years, my father called me. The phone rang twice, then 3 times. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. After everything, the dismissals, the quiet disrespect, the way he had reduced me in front of a room full of people, I had every right to ignore him. But I picked up, not because I owed him anything, but because part of me needed to hear what he had to say. "It's impressive," he said after a pause. No greeting, no small talk, just those 2 words, stiff, awkward, yet laced with something unfamiliar, humility. The documentary, it's powerful. I waited. Was that it? But then he added, "I didn't know you had all that in you." There it was again. Not an apology, but an admission. A crack in the armor. He was trying, in his own limited way, to show respect. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence sit between us. I wanted him to feel it, not out of spite, but so he would understand that recognition delayed is never the same as recognition earned on time. Eventually, I spoke. "I've always had it in me. You just never looked." He didn't argue. For once, he didn't talk over me or redirect the conversation. He was quiet, and I knew that meant more than any apology he could offer. After we hung up, I sat back and realized something profound. I hadn't made the documentary to prove him wrong. I'd made it because the truth mattered, because people deserved to know what was happening behind closed doors in an industry most people never think twice about. The story I told wasn't about me. It was about the people who were exploited, silenced, ignored. But somewhere along the way, telling their story had become the only way I could finally tell mine. The impact of the series rippled far beyond anything I could have imagined. Within a week of its release, major media outlets began requesting interviews. Emails flooded in from advocacy groups, human rights organizations, even former employees of the same companies I had exposed, people who had stories of their own to tell. The streaming platform announced they would greenlight a second season before the first had even finished airing. But, despite the whirlwind of attention, I stayed grounded. I still lived in the same apartment, still walked the same streets, still passed by the same buildings where I used to stand for 12-hour shifts, guarding glass doors and marble lobbies like they were treasures. Only now, people recognized me, not as the security guard in a black jacket, but as the guy who told the truth, the guy who made them think. One afternoon, I returned to the venue where the wedding had been held, not for an event, but to film an epilogue for the show. I stood near the same spot where my father had uttered those words, just a security guard. And now, with cameras rolling, I told the world about that moment. About how labels don't define people, how dignity doesn't come from a title, but from character, persistence, and purpose. That clip went viral, too. Thousands of comments poured in. People shared their own stories of being dismissed, underestimated, ignored. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a movement, a voice for every person who had ever been made to feel small by someone who couldn't see their worth. And, for the first time, I realized that what I had created wasn't just a documentary. It was proof. Proof that the quiet ones, the overlooked, the written off, we're not just anything. We are everything they never saw coming. That, as I sat in the makeup chair on set, a strange thought occurred to me. What if Dad saw this broadcast right now? Would he still think I was just a security guard? The makeup artist dabbed the final touches and moved aside, revealing my reflection in the mirror. It wasn't just the uniform and confidence, it was the years of hard work and grit etched into the way I carried myself now. I was no longer the girl who stood quietly in the background of family gatherings, overshadowed by her cousins' flashy careers or degrees. I was now the woman millions looked up to as a symbol of justice, discipline, and inspiration. I had made a name not despite my humble beginnings, but because of them. That's when my assistant tapped me on the shoulder, holding up her phone. "You need to see this," she said softly. The screen showed a recording of a wedding receptioner man giving a speech. It was Dad. "She's just a security guard," he was saying with a slight chuckle, unaware that someone had been filming the whole thing and that it had now gone viral. Not because of what he said, but because, moments later, the guests saw the TV screen behind the bar where a national news anchor had announced, "And tonight, we honor this year's Medal of Valor recipients Argent Alina Khan." The camera zoomed in on my face on screen, standing in full uniform, medals gleaming, delivering a speech that moved the entire nation. The wedding guests had turned silent, stunned. The same people who once questioned my choice to join the force were now watching me on primetime television. My dad's expression shifted in that moment, from casual arrogance to confusion, then to stunned silence. That video had racked up millions of views in just 2 days. But what struck me wasn't the irony of the moment, it was the timing. Life had a strange way of delivering justice without vengeance. I didn't have to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. That night, I turned off my phone, not out of anger, but peace. I'd spent years seeking validation from a man who never understood what strength looked like when it wore a uniform and not a suit. I had finally realized that the only approval I ever needed was from the person I had become. She, at long last, was proud of herself. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the estate grounds, the cold finality of the day's events settled over everyone. Lauren, who had started the day as a hesitant attendee, was now being escorted to a private car, still wearing the same simple yet elegant dress, her confidence now unmistakable. Back in the grand ballroom, whispers filled the corners. Some spoke of betrayal, others of poetic justice. Mr. Lennox, seated once more in his wheelchair with silent dignity, received a stream of quiet congratulations. Guests who had once scorned his humility were now shaking his hand and praising his wisdom. Journalists camped at the estate gates waiting for a word from either Lauren or the CEO. Inside, the former nanny's name was now known by every power player in the room. Women who had once dismissed her now offered kind smiles and subtle nods of respect. Men who once never noticed her suddenly recognized the sharp intellect behind the quiet eyes. Backstage, one of the board members quietly updated the company website. A new vice president had been named, and her name was Lauren Grace. On the drive home, she looked out the tinted window, watching the stars appear. She thought of the young girl who once quietly read financial books on park benches during her breaks and smiled. She hadn't changed who she was, the world had just finally seen it. In the days that followed, the story exploded across every platform, from business journals to celebrity gossip columns. From nanny to queen of the gala became a trending headline, while photos of Lauren's poised yet graceful presence went viral. Fashion blogs praised her effortless style, while financial analysts dug into her newly appointed role at the company and her unprecedented rise. Interviews poured in, all asking the same questions. How did this happen? Was it planned? Who really is Lauren Grace? But Lauren remained selective, appearing in one exclusive interview, where she calmly stated, "I didn't change. People just finally paid attention." Meanwhile, Mr. Lennox's decision to retire was quietly made official. He issued a heartfelt letter to shareholders and employees, naming Lauren as the natural choice to help lead the company into the future. Her former co-workers, those who once mocked or ignored her, sent messages filled with congratulations and apologies. She responded to each one politely, but rarely looked back. At the same time, invitations from other CEOs, tech innovators, and even politicians started flooding in. Everyone wanted a piece of the woman who had stunned the gala, not with glitter, but with truth, grit, and grace. Yet beneath all the praise and fame, Lauren remained grounded. She refused to move out of her modest apartment until the first phase of her business restructuring plan was complete. When asked why she didn't immediately splurge on a mansion or luxury lifestyle, she smiled and said, "Wealth isn't about what you wear or where you live. It's about what you build and who you bring along with you." True to her word, she began quietly supporting local charities, launching scholarship programs for working-class women, and visiting the community centers where she had once volunteered. But perhaps the most touching moment came when she returned to the home where she had once worked as a nanny. The same child, now older, ran to hug her, and the once dismissive parents watched in stunned silence as the woman they'd underestimated became a symbol of triumph. In that quiet reunion, no words were needed. Lauren's journey wasn't about revenge, but revelation, a reminder that character shines brightest when surrounded by arrogance. And as the world continued to talk, repose, and retell her story, Lauren remained focused not on the noise, but on her mission, to prove that dignity, hard work, and silent strength could move mountains, and occasionally silence an entire ballroom.